We'd like to welcome Dr. Michael Ackerman, who will be moderating our nurse engineering panel. Dr. Ackerman has over 25 years of clinical experience as a nurse innovator, research, and nationally and internationally recognized nursing leader. We are so pleased to have him here today and come share some of his experiences and moderate our nurse engineer panel. Please welcome us in joining Dr. Michael Ackerman and the nurse engineering panel.
Yay, come on up. Okay. Yeah.
Yes.
There's there, and there.
You can have that one there.
Okay, and I'll take this down. Okay, good.
Okay, I'm sorry. There we go.
Can you hear this? All right, perfect.
Not on this one. That's weird.
What Dr. Supp failed to mention is I'm a member of the Bills Mafia. Do any of you know who the Bills Mafia is? Are any of you Buffalo Bills fans out here? Probably not, huh? Well, get on board because I think they're the next Super Bowl champs. How's that for an intro? In New England. I'm Mike Ackerman. I'm from Ohio State. And I actually live in Rochester, where I worked for 20 years and created a medical device testing center. And I was told by my dean, or associate dean at the time, Bern Melnick, who's now my dean at Ohio State, I want to create this center in a school of nursing. And this was 25 years ago. And I said, no industry wants to partner with a school of nursing. There's no business out there. They want access to patients. They want access to physicians. They want access to things that we don't necessarily have. Well, she said, I don't care. Do it. And for those of you that know Bern Melnick, that's what she does. She just goes. And sure, absolutely. Is that better? Okay. So we did. And we became very successful. We became a multi-million-dollar center. And the beauty of that was we got to partner with a lot of engineers. And I created an innovation unit. I heard somebody in this group's going to start the innovation unit, so I wonder where you got that idea. By the way, Karen and I go back about 30 years. And our paths have crossed many times. But anyways, so the CVICU became my playground. Okay? That's where I brought industry in, that's where I brought technology in, and the nurses loved it. The nurses absolutely loved it, and they got to talk to engineers about the size of the font in a monitor. Now, how many of you would think that the font matters? The Philips engineers didn't think it mattered. They didn't know the average age of a nurse. And when I asked them, they said, well, why should I know that? I said, well, they can't see the screen, because they're 47 years old on average, right? So that's been my thing, and this is what we do at Ohio State. So I'm thrilled to be here. I'm in awe of what you guys have here. I really am. I'm in awe. It doesn't surprise me knowing Karen, because Karen never sits still. I'm also in awe of this panel. So I started reading their bios. I'm like, wow, how am I going to corral all this wisdom, all this energy into an hour and 45? So I'm going to take the liberty and make this a 3-hour session. Is that okay? Because to get all the information out, we're going to need 3 hours. But in all seriousness, we'll get you to lunch on time. So I'm going to ask each participant to introduce themselves, take about a minute, and then we're going to get into the discussion. I'm going to try to save about 20 minutes at the end for questions, because I'm sure you're going to have a ton. But we have a combination of nurses, nurse engineers, just an absolutely brilliant panel, and I'm absolutely thrilled to be here. So let's start with Eric.
All righty. Good morning, everybody. That's still morning, right? Yeah. My name is Eric Anderson. I've been in critical care for the last 10 years. I started in the ER, and the last 5 years or so I've been in the ICU. But in the last 2 years, I've kind of made the move to the nurse engineer side. I like to say that I'm a pretend-engineer. Don't really count as an engineer, at least, compared to what some real engineers can do. But did a biomedical engineering master's with a focus on new medical technology development and device development. And I've been working as an insights researcher for a design consultancy called Cambridge Design Partnership over in the UK, the other Cambridge. The we do a whole bunch of things outside of healthcare, but my primary focus has been in the healthcare sector, from drug delivery to medical therapy, diagnostic, and consumer health. So pleasure to be here, and from a clinical side, much more excited that things like this exist, because as a frustrated clinician, we need more of this to happen.
Awesome.
So I'm Elizabeth Sales. I am an engineer and a nurse. I started with an undergraduate degree in electrical and biomedical engineering from the University of Vermont. I fell in love with healthcare and decided that I needed more direct patient care, so I decided to go back to school and become a nurse. Worked in cardiovascular surgery at Brigham and Women's Hospital, and now I am the manager of quality, safety, education, and training within the Department of Biomedical Engineering at Brigham and Women's Hospital. My position really works with how nurses become comfortable with different medical technologies. So I'm a liaison between the Department of Nursing and Biomedical Engineering, ensuring that my internal staff are educated appropriately, understanding the clinical aspects of medical technologies, and also making sure that every device or every medical technology that is used on a patient is safe.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Hari Balasubramanian. I'm actually a colleague of Frank's in the Mechanical and Industrial Engineering department here at UMass. I'm in the industrial engineering side, which many of you may not know what it is. It's actually the use of mathematics, mathematical modeling, probability-based models, statistics-based models to sort of improve processes, systems, flows, logistics, the kind of stuff that maybe you've seen at Amazon or airline scheduling and that sort of thing. But I bring that sort of perspective to improving healthcare delivery systems. And I worked with nurses at UMass and at Bay State Medical Center, which is a hospital 30 minutes from here, to improve or reduce delays for patients. We built a hospital-wide simulation model where people come in from the ER and they can go to different units and try to see where we can sort of improve patient flow and reduce delays. So that's one example. I have other projects too, and maybe I'll get into that later. But yeah.
Hi everyone, my name is Ellen. I'm a research assistant for the center, and so I work with Karen. I've dipped my toe in a few different projects, but primarily my role is a doctoral candidate here at the Elaine area College of Nursing. And so my study, my focus is really on patient flow, and so that's why I work with Dr. Balasubramanian. But we've talked a lot about product design and innovation in terms of technology, and so I think that there's also a lot of opportunity for nurses to help contribute to process improvements and flow improvements. So my background is in ER nursing, where we really see the challenges of patient flow and overcrowding. And so I'm trying to understand from a qualitative perspective initially, how nurses really contribute to and impact patient flow, with hopefully an opportunity for collaboration in the future that can really bring nurses in and bring a more complexity and nuanced understanding of how patient flow management works.
Hello everyone, so my name is Yan-Xin Liu. I'm a faculty in the UMass, and I have a very unique positions, and I'm a faculty, have a joint appointments in the LA Maryville in the College of Nursing, and then the electrical and computer engineering department. And also I'm the adjunct assistant professors in biomedical engineering. So my background is biomedical engineering, so it's my research has been focused on wearable device and the signal processing, so how to use it in the healthcare and in the medical the field. So here, with my positions, I'm trying to be in this kind of bridge, the connections between the nursing and then engineering, and also the learning with my the nursing engineering laboratory. So now I have an engineering student and a nursing student, so they make them the collaborators make the big synergy, and try to move forward to the new healthcare field. Thank you.
Hey everyone, good morning. What a proud day to be here for this nurse engineering session. My name is San. Full name is Sangeeta Agarwal. You can follow me on LinkedIn. I'm a nurse engineer. I started as a computer engineer, bachelor's, master's, and then worked in a lot of innovation prototyping in technology labs, and ended up building video streaming on phone, which was acquired by Skype. I was always passionate about healthcare, so then I've been in healthcare for the last 15, 20 years. And my background is both as an oncology nurse and also integrative medicine, Ayurveda and yoga. So I combine a lot of this work in clinical setting as well as in research and technology. So currently what I'm doing is a couple of things. One is I work on HelpSee Clinic, which is a combination of high tech and high touch to navigate people who are going through cancer and critical illnesses, helping them with their journey. Secondly, I'm also doing research in symptom clusters using digital health and using integrative medicine. On the clinical side and product side, how do we develop it? And on the business side, as I started to work in this area, I came across a whole bunch of questions like, what's really going on here? Why are things happening this way? So on the market adoption side, I'm doing research and collaborations in developing ecosystems and answering questions around those and building sustainable models. So I'm doing that at ASU and with the ASU Mayo collaboration program, and recently I also was selected by NASA for workforce development, so I'm learning about space health, and my focus is going to be on doing space health research.
How do you top that? Holy moly. So, this whole day is about the partnership, and we're going to try to focus on that next we have 3 nurse engineers. We have 1 nurse engineer partner, and then we have 1 engineer that works in the College of Nursing. So I want to start. How did you get this group together? That is simply amazing to me. So for the nurse engineers, I'd like you to address how do the 2 disciplines help you address problems? So you have an engineering perspective, you have a nursing perspective. How do those 2 perspectives help you address problems? And do you do it similarly from each discipline or differently? So let's start with you, Eric.
Well, I guess if you wanted to boil down what is an engineer, it's someone who's a problem solver. And if you want to boil down what a nurse is, it's someone who takes care of people's medical problems, right? Like the end goal is to improve the lives of other people or improve a thing. So the approach that either side takes is remarkably similar when you make it a simple model like that. And the biggest differentiator, I think, is just the depth of knowledge. I've heard some folks refer to as T-shaped people. Maybe you know a little bit across a lot of things, you know a whole lot about one. It's the depth of knowledge that's needed in a field you don't know about, that when you can combine by pairing nursing and engineering together, you can actually make viable solutions that get at the actual problems and not just the perceived problems from the surface level.
Elizabeth, do you have anything to add?
I will say that as nurses and engineers, we both have the ability to critical think. And I think joining both the nurses and the engineers together, even though we have a very different skill set, we both have those critical thinking skills that we can actually, as Eric mentioned, collaborate together and come up with viable solutions. So I think a partnership between the 2, it makes perfect sense.
Perfect. San.
Yeah, I think I agree with Eric and Elizabeth that problems are similar and we are critical thinkers. I think one thing I can share from my experience is whether you're a nurse thinking about product or you're an engineer thinking about how you can help in healthcare, you can take as many courses as you can and then use as much of online resources as available. Like I consume an insane amount of courses on Coursera and all these online platforms because that can help you to give the knowledge about the other side and think about how you can address a problem that exists today. So in my mind, because I studied both, like I think, like Eric and Elizabeth were saying, you think about what is the problem and then what's the potential solution for that problem. Technology is a way to automate the solution to the problem, to decrease the cost potentially of providing that solution, of delivering that solution. But the end user becomes really important. Are you building it for solving the problem or not, so that the solution can actually be valuable? I think where the combination of the two becomes useful is both from an idea perspective. You know, you're taking something that could be a frustration, but solving it, you know, with a potential product, but also looking at, is it viable? Because maybe it's something that's that requires a certain team to build it. It requires a certain amount of resources to build it, and then certain amount of resources to maintain it. And those are things that, having worked in both the fields, you are able to think about that so that your product can sustain.
Awesome. And Yancik, you have a cool job. You're an engineer in a college of nursing.
Yeah, right.
And so why don't you tell the group, like, how do you help faculty out with problem solving from an engineering perspective? What's your unique perspective on problem solving that helps faculty, students, staff in the college?
Yeah, that's a good question. So actually, I need to tell my story. So, and as I told you, my background is biomedical engineering. So, and I graduated at Yonsei University in South Korea. So that university is first school in biomedical engineering in the Eastern Asia area. So my advisors, the PhD advisor, is a senior person. So he always empathize. We need to try to find the problems in the medical side. What things that we can solve with our technology, or So yeah, he always advises us. So we need to look carefully in an engineer in the healthcare field. So that's what we support it. And then in order to do that, our biomedical engineering programs always include some the medical knowledge, so anatomy or the physiology, and all some parts. So in the medical faculty that come to our campus and explain and have the requisite courses for the biomedical engineering students. So. And here, so the exercise I have, the biomedical engineering some mind. So when I applied it here, in the next university looking for the nurse engineer. So I'm not a nurse, but how can I be a nurse engineer? But I'm trying to think how I can differentiate the nurse engineer and from the biomedical engineer. So I'm trying to, just my personal opinions. Is I thought, the nursing engineering is the bigger one, than the biomedical engineering, because they're not only including developing biomedical equipment, the device, and the software, but also that we need to care how to care patients in a better way. So my research tried to focus on not only the developing the wearable device and the software, and then the design, and then the whole process for the monitoring system, but also how my research can improve the nursing, the workflow, and then also including the healthcare, health issues. So what I'm trying to do here is that try to, and first of all, I need to tell them, it is very important not only the collaborations between the nursing engineer, but also we need to reduce the gap in terms of the perspective in the nursing and engineering. So when you try to collaborating between different discipline, and then it made an attempt to say just their own perspective. So it cannot reduce the gap. So I think in education in both colleges is very important that I'm supposed to hear I'm trying to create in the courses and the technology in health and try to introduce all the nursing, the faculty and the students to understand how the engineering goes in terms of the healthcare field. So how can address the healthcare problems, the setting problems with the technology and the science. So yeah, so that's what I'm trying to do here. Yeah.
All right, good luck with that.
Thank you.
So our last group is a partnership, a nurse and an engineer partnership, and I'm interested in the relationship. What value is the nursing perspective? What value is the engineering perspective? How do you work together? How do you divide the work? Just describe for us your relationship and how that all works.
Good as-
Yeah, either one.
Yeah.
Do you want to dive in?
Yeah.
Sorry, can everyone hear me? So I'm a doctoral candidate, and Hari's on my committee. So that's where our relationship comes from. But I think what we share and what we value in a nurse-engineer partnership is how the same topic can be approached from two different perspectives. So, Hari mentioned how engineers can approach problems with simulations and modelings and very quantitative perspectives. And I'm trying to just approach the same problem from a different perspective. So I do qualitative research, and so trying to bring complexity and really understand on the ground how patient flow works in a real life situation. And so I think what we value is that you can have the same core problem and then you can have two wildly different approaches, but that fusing them together can really strengthen our understanding of the problem. I'm sure you can add more to that.
Yeah, I think it's very similar, and I always felt like, in our field, we are emphasizing a lot of mathematics, computing, modeling, and I've always felt that these factors were not quite covering the full picture. They were always deficient in certain ways, and there were qualitative perspectives on what happened in practice, clinical perspectives that were not being included in those models. So the only way, and I think it was out of necessity, to be realistic, to be able to ensure that things get put into practice or you're working on problems that are relevant, that was when, I started reaching out to, College of Nursing and other clinical departments to just make sure that, the models I was building were of value that could be used. And I think while I was going through Ellen's proposal, I think I noticed sort of this, completely different perspective, grounded theory or qualitative, surveys on the same topic, patient flow. So it was completely different from what, let's say, a student in my field would do. They would say, okay, here's a problem, here's the model, here are the analysis, here are some theorems, maybe even, and so that it's just that I always felt like the engineering data perspective wasn't encompassing a lot. It was leaving out a lot. And the only way to complete that picture was to collaborate. And this meant a lot of trips to hospitals, a lot of discussions with students or nursing faculty. And so that's kind of how I've approached it.
Excellent. So I think there's a theme that I hear here, and it's the value of cross-functional teams. Anybody want to take that? What's the value of cross-functional teams? Is it essential? How do you do it? Anybody? San?
Sure. I think as we heard today morning with what Karen and Frank were sharing, it's the cross-functional teams that will help us to connect the dots that were not connected before. Today we exist in silos, or were existing in silos. The present is different now, thanks to the center. So we have been existing in silos where we look at problems from one perspective, like what Dr. Balasubramaniam was just saying. So we were used to looking at problem from our perspective, like looking at the elephant and, from one angle. But by looking at it from multidisciplinary approach, we are able to look at a fuller picture of the problem, and hence by doing that, we are able to actually better solve those problems by bringing people together. And also, I think when we build cross-functional teams, especially in a way that they're not hierarchical, but they're collaborative, it gives an equal voice to different professionals or different stakeholders who are invested in the same problem, and they may be bringing different perspectives. So I think as we look at where the future is going in healthcare and technology advancements, I think cross-functional collaboration, cross-functional education is going to be critical and necessary in how we develop solutions.
Anybody else?
Yeah.
Go
Who
ahead.
here has experienced every experience that anyone could ever possibly experience? Really? Nobody? Okay. Well, if we're designing something to improve health that we're going to apply across the board, how in the world can we expect isolated perspectives to give us an answer that's useful or applicable or going to serve well enough all of these different experiences? It's not going to happen. So in lieu of the fact that none of us have experienced all of the things, we need to find some other people that have experienced at least a few other things that we haven't.
Excellent. Anybody else?
Yeah, I have one thing to add. I think we've spoken about how, nurses and engineers may approach problems differently in terms of qualitative versus quantitative, in terms of just how we're trained to critically think. But in my own work, I found another big component is just that we speak different languages. And so just understanding concepts and problems can be really challenging cross-discipline. Even talking within nurses, I think, especially as you become, if you're a nurse, you know about the different levels of expert nursing. But as you become more of an expert nurse, oftentimes nurses have a hard time explaining what we do and how we do the things we do. And so much of what we do is, hard to explain and on gut feeling and things like that. So even just talking with nurses in the ER about patient flow, so many of these ideas that we're discussing, we have different terminology for, we have different understandings of, just wrapping our heads around these problems, like so much of that is hard to express and communicate. So I look at this, trying to talk to nurses about patient flow, and I think, how would an engineer have a conversation with a nurse? They're throwing out ESI and acuity, like we're throwing out all these lingo and this world that we live in, and if I don't even understand your tracking system and I am a nurse, how would an engineer break this down? So it's not just how we think about problems and how we critically solve, but it's the language that we use.
Excellent, excellent. So my experience with the collaboration is we received a fairly sizable grant to build an extended reality lab at Ohio State to integrate extended reality into our undergraduate curriculum, whole curriculum, 700 students, 60 faculty. But the differentiator, and there was 340 applications and they gave 10 awards. So we were thrilled. But I think the differentiator was we also collaborated with our College of Engineering. They have a machine learning artificial intelligence lab. And so what they do is pull EHR data, real EHR data, into a database, and nurses or students sit in front of 10 patients and prioritize. And then it learns, the machine has learned what happens to the patients, gives feedback to the students in a risk-free environment. Students can make mistakes, learn from mistakes, but I think that collaboration set us apart from some really big schools that applied for this award. So I think the day is now that we have to collaborate. We have to seek partnerships. The other partnership that we haven't talked about is finance. Because if you put a group of nurses together, they'll design something for you. But then the finance person will say, it's going to cost you $2 million to manufacture that. And that's just not feasible for a disposable item. So I think the finance piece is also critical. So this is a lead into something, I want to do something a little bit different. I want to challenge our panel, okay? So, and we're talking about different perspectives. So we have 6 different perspectives up here, right? And they are going to tell me in 1 minute what you can do with this, okay? So we'll start with you, Eric.
All righty. Well, You can make a whole lot of toothpicks out of it.
Okay, toothpicks. Okay, next.
I would actually change the angle of the handle, because I don't know how this would work very well as it is now.
Okay, change the handle.
Maybe I'd look at the geometry of this.
Oh, the engineer wants the geometry, right? Toothpicks, angles, functionality, angles.
Well, we got some background information. This is a kitchen utensil, so my gut reaction was maybe like a yolk separator.
Okay, yolk separator. Here we go.
Yeah, so I'm gonna put in some temperature sensors, and I'm gonna measure the temperature. So
Okay, temperature sensors, good.
Okay. Yeah, I can think of a couple of uses, I guess, in the kitchen for stirring things and for potentially like separating egg and yolk. I can think of this as if for playing games, like if there was a ball that will fit in this size.
Okay, game.
Then, we could do like game kind of activities with for physical therapy with adults or with children. So kind of make fun games out of this.
All right, so now we have a game. Here we go.
I can think of like few more, but
Yes, I know, we could go on forever. But why did I do this? This is the value of multiple perspectives. If we just sit in our own little silos and try to solve problems without involving other people, but we came up with about 6 different uses of this device, and they didn't know what it was. All right, for your knowledge, this is a Danish dough ring. Did anybody know that? A Danish dough ring. My wife said, if you don't bring this home, don't bother coming home. She's a baker, and she's like, I said, I gotta find the wackiest thing in your drawer, and I said, I have no idea what this is, but again, the value of multiple perspectives is absolutely critical. So let's keep going here. So let's start with you, Eric. The value of end user perspective, because we all know that you've gotten something at the store, you've gotten a new product, you say, who designed this, right? We've all said that. Value of end user perspective.
Yeah, it's got to be the place that you start before. Like, there's feedback from a user. I'd say that's something you'll have to get later. Before you even get to the feedback part, before you make the thing that you get feedback on, maybe some feed forward where you try to learn from whoever it is you're developing or designing for. What is that person's actual need? Because if you don't actually know what they're trying to do, anything that you try to make for them is probably going to be wildly off. The empathy that is required, and one of the reasons that I think nurses are so good at this opportunity to partner with engineering for development is they're so well trained and well practiced at empathizing and understanding from the perspective of the other person what is needed from me. And you can do that. I start very much on the front end in my job, but if you get some feed forward on what the actual goal is, by the time you get to the device and getting the testing and the feedback, I feel like that's going to be a whole lot more useful, pointed you in the right direction.
Perfect. Elizabeth, you have anything to add?
So I kind of see this on a daily basis, both when I was working as a bedside nurse and as an engineer. So the forefront of the bedside nurses is to take care of that patient, to make sure that that patient is safe. And if they're running into problems with medical technologies, then they're not focusing on what their core function really is. And as nurses at the bedside, it's really important to be able to provide that feedback to whoever is designing the medical technologies. And that's why I actually feel it's very refreshing that this center has been designed in the first place, because that person who is, using those medical technologies, but also making sure that their patients are safe, they are the ones that really should get involved in providing that feedback to those that make the medical technologies.
Excellent. How about you, Hari?
So maybe I can give an example of this. So we had a project with the hospital where we built a simulation model to improve patient flow, reduce delays. I mentioned that earlier. And so we had to, I think, maybe the first 2 years was spent entirely on just discussing what are the problems that the administrators at Bay State wanted. How did they link to the problems that the patients had, whether at the discharge level or waiting too much between the ED and going to a certain unit or not. And what data can we collect to, is this accurate or not? Can the data show this or not? So it took actually 2 years of regular visits to the hospital to figure out perspectives from multiple stakeholders that some of the nurses at Bay State had brought together. And it was only after that, 2 years, it was 2011 to 2015, that we could actually proceed with building, whatever model it was, a computer-based model to sort of address some of those questions. And so sometimes it can feel like a very long process, but for me, it's sort of it's essential and there's no other way around it. And often the terminology is different. People are using different terms for different things. So in that case, I was curious, as you mentioned, who was my end user, or at least from my perspective, were the end users, the administrators, the nursing and physician leadership that was interested in these questions? Was it the patients who are going to experience the changes that we're going to make? And I think I was not interviewing patients or getting qualitative surveys from patients. It was only through the clinical team, which included nurses, that I would be able to gauge what was good. So that was, I think, sort of a process. As an example, I don't know what was the best way to go about it, but this was the way that we went about it.
So you spent 2 years
Yes.
figuring it out.
And collecting the data, so it was a multi-pronged process.
Sure.
Yes.
But 2 years, I mean, and how often do we just kind of jump in and try to solve the problem without fully understanding what the problem is? And I think you mentioned something else that's very critical, and that is who are the end users? Because in a complex adaptive system, there's multiple end users, and if you make a tweak over here, you have to understand how that tweak may affect things downstream. So I'm going to shift gears a little bit, and so Alan, you work with Hari, and I'm sure there's been times things haven't went real well. So in design and in innovation, we talk about the role of failure. What is the role of failure in this process?
Yeah, so I can really only speak as where I'm at right now, which is a researcher. But I'm doing actually grounded theory, which kind of embraces failure, because we recognize that processes in research and learning are iterative, and that you can have one data collection and build on that. So each sequential failure is something obviously that you learn from, and I know we talk about that a lot. But that's really what grounded theory and qualitative research is about embracing each step and building from there.
Okay, Jansik, same question.
So
In your work, where does failure come in?
just tell about how to collaborate between the two disciplinary. So all those have very big aims. For example, we're monitoring all the behavior in the physical or the mental behavior. But in an engineering perspective, actually, so we cannot measure all things with the one sensor. I think it is very important to narrow down. So when collaborating between two disciplinary, and also that each side is the need to try to understand what's going on and how these systems or how the nursing sciences goes on, so that they can collaborate and talk to each other. So and also, yeah.
Okay, thank you. Sen, you're an entrepreneur.
Yes.
That's a hard journey,
Yes.
right? Getting money, having an idea. You've probably experienced a few setbacks in your journey. Talk to us about it.
Wow, I think there are ups and downs every day. So many things to handle. I think whether you are being a researcher or innovator or entrepreneur, I think what I had to learn was to embrace failure. And while I used to talk about it, and look at it at an organization level, or look at agile development to address failures. When I personally faced it as an entrepreneur, I can say it was challenging for me because I felt I let people down who were counting on me to have this idea figured out. But as I started to actually reflect on it and have self-compassion, I realized that I needed to turn the question around and say, okay, this didn't work. What can we do now? How might we address this particular challenge? Is this a problem that just I'm having, or is it a challenge that other organizations or other people in similar situations would face too? And for me, that's been very transformative in being able to look at the challenges I face as something that I can seek guidance for, or look at ways that we can develop body of knowledge around implementation. I recently learned there's implementation science, which is developing this body of knowledge around how do you implement things. So that's how I'm personally handling it. I think some examples around usability and failure that, from a product perspective, we saw was when I started to build our technology, which is to help navigate patients through cancer care, we took user feedback in the beginning about what they wanted, and then we started to build the solutions as a collaboration between clinicians and engineers. When I took that product back and started to do field testing, user testing, patients were like, there's no way we are going to fill out 3 pages of information just because, your oncologist wants it, or the researchers wants it, or the engineer wants it to collect data. It needs to be, minimal information that's asked of me, and I need to get answers right away. So that's where, the feedback and failure actually becomes an iterative cycle of better development and better solutions, because now those stakeholders are there throughout the journey. None of our features ever pass unless they're passed by the users who are going to be using the solution.
Excellent. And I think, I'm trying to figure out another word because I don't like the word failure. It's just got a negative connotation, but I haven't figured out another word. But it is, I think you said a few things. Iterative, all right? It's part of the process. It's essential for the process. And I think in healthcare, we're so risk averse that failure is, we have to avoid failure. And if a process doesn't work, we say, oh man, now what? Well, you just pivot and you try something else. So very valuable insight. So I'm a nurse at the bedside. I work in the ICU, right? I have this problem. I have an idea how to fix it. Eric, where do I go? What do I do? And I'm going to ask each of you the same question.
I guess, do you want credit for the idea, or?
What's that mean? Because I have no idea what IP is.
Sure.
Because early in my career, I probably gave away more IP than. But good question.
It's certainly something that is not in the forefront of the nursing curriculum, I'd say. If somebody's got an idea for a thing or an improvement, I would say if it's a tangible thing, there's opportunity to develop it. That would potentially be a valuable thing. I would probably look online to see if similar things exist, and if your thing is too close, you may be infringing on other people's intellectual property. But if you don't find anything, that might be an opportunity to go and pursue continued development. You don't have to go right away to a lawyer or anything and necessarily get a patent. You can do a lot of research, keeping the concept close, and use like a non-disclosure agreement where if you have somebody sign it with you, you can talk to them about it, and they are bound to not go tell others about it.
No, I'm going to push back, Eric.
Yeah.
That's too hard. What you just described, as a bedside nurse, I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to go online. I want resources to help me solve my problem. So I'm going to go to Elizabeth and say, help me solve my problem. Because Eric, I don't want to go to the internet. I don't want to look for the IP or a lawyer. I'm like, I just want this little thing fixed. How do I do that, Elizabeth?
So I think the first approach would be to see if there's something internal that you can branch that idea out. So I'm a big believer that if you have an idea, you can spread that idea around internally and be able to grow it from there. So for example, there are some hospitals that have like nursing innovation groups. So having committees within the hospital that could help you develop that.
Okay, so now I got a committee. Do any of you have those? Do your nurses know where to go if they have a problem? So I was just messing with you, Eric. But,
No, it's fine.
it's okay.
I mean, I work for a consultancy.
You still like, oh, right. Of course, he wants my business. Yeah, I should have known. But committees, okay? But you know, we don't have a committee, but I got a friend.
form it.
Well, we could form it. And I've got a friend named Hari who's an engineer. Maybe I'll talk to him. Hari, help me solve this problem. How are we going to do it? Do you want to know what the problem is?
What's that?
Do you want to know what the problem is?
Yeah, you mean so the nursing having problems at the bedside.
I need a better way to do something.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
how do I solve that?
So, I would talk, I guess that, maybe I would listen as much as possible to what the issue is, and probably I wouldn't know anything about it, that's the first thing. And so it would be having multiple discussions is what I would do, and maybe if there's anything in my sort of expertise that could assist with that process, then you could proceed and start a collaboration. That would be, not collaboration, because I'm still talking like an academic here. So if there's an easy solution that and that could be directly put in, then you would proceed with that. If not, hopefully connect that person with a better source.
Possible solutions.
Multidisciplinary groups.
A multidisciplinary group, okay. And then Hari, we go to your partner, Ellen, and how are you going to help me? Because I still have this problem. I work at the bedside. I don't have a lot of resources. I'm going to make a committee. I'm going to create this committee. I'm really excited. My chief nurse is supportive of that. So now what?
Yeah, I was actually going to say the opposite. I was going to say, in my own experience, the problem isn't nurses developing solutions. The problem is us disseminating that knowledge. So in my own practice, from what I see, nurses are putting together solutions all the time. We have to. We are thinking on the spot. We're innovating in real time. We're coming up with our own little hacks. The problem isn't necessarily nurses not having solutions. It's then how do we test that, validate that, and then spread that information.
Excellent. Yancik, now we're getting closer. So now I'm going to go to you, the engineer, and say, okay, we're getting closer. Now what?
Yes, I think so we started from, so what you want to fix it. So you're saying that in nursing in an ICU, and then we need to figure out, so what is the problem? So if we have the electrical equipment and problems, so you may need to contact to the electrical and computer engineering. And then if you have some kind of stand or something, you change some of the physical things, you might collaborate with the mechanical engineering. And if you have problems in the sensors or other things, maybe the polymer science, and then the chemistry, the chemistry or the physical, the physics departments. So it depends on the problems, the different directions.
Okay.
So that's why in education both colleges is important. So that once you have against some problems, and then you need to think where I should be context, or how can I develop my idea in the right directions.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I'm a bedside nurse. How do I access you?
The bedside, maybe. So what's the?
How do I? So if I'm a bedside nurse, and I know that there's this wonderful center.
Yeah.
Okay. How do I access it?
Access where?
Access the center and your expertise.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, so just the contact me.
No, I'm being serious, like, so we've got this wonderful center,
Yeah.
right? And we need to serve the people at the point of care. How do people that need this expertise get to any of the faculty or students or staff that are here? And that's my question. So, San, you're an engineer and a nurse.
Yeah.
We're getting closer to being able to create this, whatever it is. Now what do we do?
So I was thinking of answering, if you think it's okay, with two stories.
Sure.
Where this exactly happened. So one is when I was doing chemotherapy at the hospital, and I uncovered some things that were a bit clunky for me. I was newer to the unit, so I started to ask around. I was like, well, this seems to be like a little bit risky, where we could make some errors accidentally if we don't do certain things. So what do we do? So I started by asking my colleagues and nurses who've been on the floor, and I uncovered hacks like Ellen was talking about how we do internal steps to ensure that we are not making that potential mistake that was there in the software or the features that were not there. So that's how I first did it. But then I started to think about, well, this can be something that can be a fix within the product, right? This is something that can be fixed by developing code or by changing the code. So I started to ask about it, and my manager was very supportive. They connected me to, so this was for Epic. It happened to be for chemotherapy. So they connected me to Epic team that was doing chemotherapy-related workflows. And we ended up actually working on Beacon, which is the chemotherapy management tool within Epic. And I started working with my team, with my nurses, and with the engineering in how to develop that flow so that it can actually work for our nurses. So it became an actual product or a component within the Epic product that is specially focused on chemotherapy. So one example of how this is, you just roll up your sleeves and say, I want to make a difference here. And you just start to figure out the next step and the next step in how you can make that change. Another quick, simple example was, which ended up becoming something big, was I was doing research at UCSF for one of my studies, and we wanted to measure heart rate and sleep quality. So we used to give our participants this very clunky watch, not even a watch, it was an Actigraph. So it was like this big thing that they were wearing on their hand, and they didn't like it. Again, these happened to also, build friendships with them, so they were more open with me about how they felt about using this. So we had like these kind of lecture series when I was at Stanford, where we would get together, interdisciplinary team, and I brought up this thing as part of a conference brainstorming workshop. So we all got together, started to think about it. There happened to be people from Apple there, and there happened to be a lot of patients there who were, vocal about the problem, engineers thinking about the solution, and, software developers thinking about how we could solve it, because, the pieces were there. And that kind of ended up becoming the first conversation about Apple Health, and went on to become Apple Health Pilot and then Apple Health Products. So you never know where your idea can go. You just show up and do what you can. And it could turn out to be something that helps a lot of people, or few people, but you participated in the process and made a difference.
That's an awesome story. So in researching for this session, I went into kind of the history of innovation and creative teams, and I found this citation for the Medici effect. Has anyone ever heard of it? The Medici effect. It was back in Florence about 400 or 500 years ago. The country was, or the city and the country was stagnated. So the Medici family brought together scholars, artists, poets, scientists, sculptors, and it created this creative explosion when they brought in all these disciplines, and that's called the Medici effect. I think what you're seeing here is a little bit of the Medici effect, where you bring together all the expertise of all these wonderful disciplines, all these great scholars for something better, for something bigger, for something that has more impact. So thank you for all that you all do. I'm going to end with one last question, and then or comment, and then we'll take some questions from the group. So we'll start down with you, San. Just words of advice for the group from an entrepreneur, innovator perspective.
Well, a couple of things. One is just if you're passionate about something, just show up. Whether there's a seat at the table or not, just go pull up your chair and make a seat for yourself. And contribute in whatever way you can when you're starting out. Go learn a lot and see where you can help. Sometimes you might be able to help with just, calendar management to bring the team together. And other times you might be contributing on something that's very, technical or clinical. Don't be afraid of failure. That is something that I learned after many years. It's expected, Einstein or whatever. Thomas Edison, he failed 1,000 times, right, before he made the bulb, but that invention changed the world. So I would say, don't be afraid of failure. It's okay. Turn that around and say, how can we do this? How might we do this? You might be able to get advice and help. And then when you're doing something and you know that you built it or you contributed, then ask for your worth. Ask for your IP or your worth for what you contributed, because I think that's something where you want to get the credit that you deserve.
Jacek?
Yep. So, I wanted to emphasize that just collaboration is not enough. And actually, understanding a different discipline is very important, I think. So that's why the education in each college is very important. So, for the nurse, the scientist, so I would like to say, and I recommend that it's not just to give the top, the projects to the engineer and the science. Try to understand how they can figure out the first, and so that based on that, when I reach out to the scientists and the engineers, so you can talk in a more detail, and then they specifically to provide feedbacks or the directions that how the engineer scientists can develop based on the request. And so in order to do that, try to and I think in college nursing, we have we need to have a lot of opportunity to share the engineering and the stuff and the scientist stuff. And on the other side, for engineer, in the biomedical engineers, basically based on their idea, and then try to reach out to the clinicians and the medical providers so that they can collaborate. But especially for the engineers, so we need to, and the engineers, they need to try to how can I say that? Going to show that their stuff to the clinicians. So that's what kind of technology is existed for the nurses, so that they can choose, the nurses or the health providers can choose, and then so that they contact them, so they figure out their problems. So, and it's when I collaborated, I recommend it, to always narrow down the problems. For example, just if the health providers want to measure everything with one sensor, that is impossible. So for example, with the hand watch, and so we cannot measure the electrocardiogram. But actually, so in order to measure electrocardiograms, we always need to do another hands on the device, right? So in that problems, if the health providers know about the engineering stuff, and then they don't need to tell about this, and more efficient in the discussions how to address the problems. So this is my the comment.
Excellent. So, and I think as nurses, we don't know what we don't know. So talking to an engineer is like, you can do that? Like, I toured our biomed lab last month, and I guess I didn't know that you can 3D print in metal. Like, maybe I should have known, but I was like, holy cow, you can print that with metal? So it's, a lot of it is we don't know what we don't know, and talking to an engineer can certainly broaden our perspectives. Next.
So my advice is for nurses. My advice would be to know that there's a need for your voice and to feel empowered to take that step. When I started researching patient flow, it felt like such a big topic because there's so much crowding and it's such a big issue in our healthcare right now. And I was going through, there's like thousands of articles about patient flow, and they're from healthcare administrators, and they're from engineers, and they're from businessmen, and it took me a full year to trust what I was finding and really believe that, like, oh, the voice of nurses really isn't here. And I didn't have enough confidence in myself, in my own. I thought I was missing something entirely. I was like, well, where is the understanding about how nurses are doing this? Where are the nurses in this conversation? And they're not there. But it took me so long to come to that conclusion that was the truth. And then once I talked to more people and found out that there really isn't much research from nurses, then I felt empowered, and then I felt comfortable stepping in and saying, I can be that person, I can do that research. But it took me a long time to wrap my head around that. So I think just for nurses, just feel empowered and trust your own expertise that you're bringing. And it might not be simulation modeling, it might not be, higher administration financing, but we have our own knowledge, and there is a need for it.
Excellent. Hari?
Yes, I can attest to that. That literature review that I read from Ellen, it brought in all these different perspectives in a beautiful way. So my comment has to do with the difficulty in keeping collaborative projects going in the long term and having something meaningful emerge. It's not always going to happen, I think. I think there's a whole constellation of reasons why some things work, and after it's the minority of things that end up working. And maybe there are many ingredients among cases, maybe there's the one ingredient could be sincerity on all sides, where everybody wants something to work, is genuinely interested, and then a lot of patience to sort of keep things going over usually for good, strong, collaborative, meaningful projects are usually multiple years. So keeping that intensity or keeping that interest over a long period of time is not easy, and which is why I think if I try 5 things, only one often actually works out in many others, and all of those are useful in other ways, even if they don't work. So, yeah, there are many of these ingredients, which I'd say interest, sincerity, and patience over the long term.
Elizabeth?
I think very similar to the other panelists. I think nurses really need to be out there with their voice. They have a lot of great ideas. Excuse me. I think, making their ideas known is very important, and being able to collaborate with engineers to get, ideas actually in a place where they're feasible. Just make your voice known.
Thanks. Last but not least, Eric?
Always ask one more empathetic why. I think not losing the curiosity is going to be incredible. In the role of the nurse, you've got the physician's orders. As you're doing your shift for taking care of the patient, yes, that is your role. But don't leave it there. Bring it with you. You can continue to ask and explore and discover new things, all from an incredibly valuable perspective. Nursing, I feel like there's such a lack of understanding of what nursing is if you're not part of it. And there's so much opportunity there because too few folks have ventured to figure it out. And that's what this venture between nursing and engineering is going to definitely help to break that apart. So got to be polite about it, but always asking why it is the way it is, because there will be plenty of reasons that you should make it better.
Awesome. All great advice. So we've got about 15 minutes, and we'll be happy to take some questions. If you have a general question, one of the panel can answer. If you have a specific question, anybody have any questions? Yes. All right.
Thank you. I'm a secondary school teacher, high school teacher, UMass 88, mechanical engineering. And one of the classes I teach is what we refer to as advanced robotics, where the kids create robots that perform something. So when I came here, I was looking for ideas for things to have my kids do over the course of this year. It sounds like those ideas exist. Why don't hospitals and other medical companies already have an R&D so that nurses can go to them internally and not worry about, I don't know an engineer, maybe this kid down the street who mows my lawn, I think he's an engineering student. Why don't those exist? And you guys may not know, but maybe you do.
I can take, go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say, I think that's a great question for this afternoon panel. But, go ahead.
Yeah, I think you bring up such a great point because it's so much needed in terms of being able to share real-world problems that students can create solutions for, and then also being able to collaborate. I think we need more and more of that, and I think this center is a great place to get that started. Many hospitals, or some hospitals, are starting to make a maker lab. Like I'm involved with the ASU Mayo Innovation Collaboration, and what you're saying is exactly the goal. You know, like just last week I had a conversation with the nurses, and they were saying, well, how do we have some ideas about things, how do we go build it? And we are working on how nurses can be part of the maker lab within Mayo Innovation, where they're going in and they would have a team that will help them to facilitate thinking and brainstorming through it and developing potentially a solution, whether that's an internal solution or it can be something that becomes bigger. But they can continue to work in their primary role and still be involved as an innovator in addressing the problem. And similarly, like what you're saying about students, like one of my initiative is in how do I help students to know more about actual problems within the healthcare setting. So we are having cross-mentorship programs where different speakers come and talk about what they're doing and the kind of problems that they have. They submit a list of problems, and then we have students who are in their first year in the Edison Innovation Program. They're in their first year. They do projects as part of their class project on that particular problem, and then they present it at the end of the semester, and they can have their mentor along with them who propose the problem. So what you're saying is so needed. Just go out there and, find those kind of collaborations for your students, because they will end up becoming somebody who make a big difference in that area.
I just want to add, I think that, on the ground in real life, I think nurses do face a lot of challenges, and one of those is that hospital administration or culture in general doesn't necessarily value or compensate us as thinkers and innovators. And so nurses have lots of ideas, but if you're asking nurses to be innovative, to reach out to engineers, you're asking them to do it on their own time, right? Because we work 12 hours, we're all burnt out, we have a lot of patient care. That asking nurses to take that extra step and to face all these barriers is really asking a lot. So I think there's a lot of challenges for nurses on the floor to be innovators and to really step into that space when we have so much on top of us already. So I think that's one of the real challenges that's out there.
Great point. It seems like it should be a common sense kind of a thing, and there are certainly barriers to getting to the nurses. I mean, even the 12-hour shift alone it's exhausting, and then you're done at 7 and everyone's closed, right? So there's a lot of that, but that's absolutely why I believe that nursing is untapped as a resource for things that should improve. And I joke about the industry panel answering that, but they're everybody from your peers to your hospital administrators to just the lack of your familiarity with what the next step is. All of those people get to say no. All of those situations get to say no. And to Mike's question before, like, where do you go? And unless you've got capability, equipment, and the desire to go to the nurses, to ask them, like, in the heat of the moment, what's your problem, before you clock out, forget it, and leave work at work, like, we miss out on so many ideas. And so you're spot on, and there are plenty there to go have them find and help improve healthcare delivery. Thank you.
Hi, Megan Huber. I'm an assistant professor in mechanical engineering and robotics. So my question starts with observation. I've heard a lot about the translational research. So you have a problem, and then you need a solution immediately, right? But I'm also curious about your thoughts on use-inspired basic research, right? And so what are really the fundamental basic research questions that we as perhaps academic researchers need to address so that we don't just take somewhat perhaps even hacky solutions and apply them to nursing, but really what are the fundamental questions, areas that we need to be focusing on to provide even better solutions for nursing? Or is it that nursing, again, is it all translational research that really is the most important?
I don't understand all of your engineering terminology, but I think I understand some of what you're speaking about, and I can speak about my topic. I think, because my focus is really on trying to answer those really fundamental questions, right? So what is patient flow management? What does it look like in a real hospital setting, and how do nurses do that work? Those are those fundamental questions that really haven't been answered. And when I started trying to answer those fundamental questions, I realized that the concept of patient flow management hadn't even been defined. So you start with a broad problem, and then you realize, oh, we don't really have an understanding of this concept, and then we don't even have how to define it. So I had to kind of like take step back. And I realized at the core of the issue was how we define patient flow management. And if you look at the research, and I did a concept analysis that was based in literature, and this is more nuanced than you need, but patient flow management was defined by engineers and by business administrators as this one definition, and that definition didn't include nurses. Whereas when you talk to nurses and you say, what's patient flow management? They say, it's a nursing process. So those two different understandings of the definition of what patient flow management is that led in these, you can understand why we're at where we're at. So first I had to define what is patient flow management. Oh, it's a nursing task, right? Like nurses understand it as a nursing process. And then once you have that concept, then you can say, okay, well, what does it look like? How is it done? And then with that qualitative nuanced understanding, as I'm hoping, maybe, then we can take it to the next step and problem solve. But you're right, I think you need to step back and answer those fundamental questions first before we jump to the solutions and the problem solving.
Yeah, so I think in my field, for example, there's a lot of interest in fundamental mathematical models or probability models, and the question often arises is like you're solving these real world problems, but does anything come out of it that is fundamentally mathematically interesting? There may be various subfields in it, and they're all trying to figure out if there is something you can say for certain on, let's say, the occupancy levels in a hospital can be explained by a certain expression. Maybe not perfect, but it gives you a back of the envelope idea. So that would be in my field. But I think probably what you're looking at is, are there fundamental advances in physics engineering, biology engineering that are required at the bedside that maybe academics in sort of the STEM fields can then research. And I think that's an interesting question for the others. In my field, it would be more the mathematical innovations that come out. But yeah, maybe Yonshik has some.
Yeah. So my research, mostly is my research based on it, basically in the hardware stuff. So it's not not starting starting from the fundamental research questions. So basically, so the more the fundamental questions in terms of the hardware design is that how can the measure biosignal comfortably or something. So what kind of materials are needed. So this is starting from the desk side, not to the nursing side. But if we combine with nursing research, maybe we can start from the how this wearable technology or data collection systems in helping nurses workflow, and also how can contribute to the nurse the health providers in health conditions, so that we can eventually improve the quality of the care from the health providers.
Anybody else have anything to add?
Well, I guess my question back to you was, if you have a certain specific idea in mind, or you think there's a specific gap that we are missing today that you're thinking of that hasn't been addressed?
I think it's more the point that, right, we have, so again, it seems like a lot of what we're talking about is like you have a very specific problem, and then what are the engineering tools, technologies available to solve that problem? But instead of thinking, what I don't see currently right now, and as a field, or maybe you can enlighten me on it, is a problem, but then how do we make fundamental advancements that will, say, solve that problem? So your example with like talking with Apple and developing the watches and whatnot. I mean, their process as a company is to go and take algorithms that exist currently and then apply them to technology, as opposed to, I have this problem, I'm going to now ask fundamental questions about how I develop those algorithms from the nursing standpoint. And unfortunately, that might lead to innovations 10, 20 years down the road, but at least they would actually be informed by nursing problems, specific problems. So I'm just curious, like, what people's thoughts are or experiences are in doing that type of work.
Yeah, I think that's the heart of the question, is if we are not asking that question, then we are essentially setting ourselves up for failure. So the question you're asking is, if I understand correctly, is what is the problem we are trying to solve, right? And then what is the best way to solve that? Because technology, whether that's robotics or digital health or, sensors, these are tools to solve a problem. So it all starts with looking at what is the problem, how bad is the problem, what is the impact of that problem, and how big is the impact of that problem? Is this something that affects a large number of people? When we look at building solutions, you're looking at these questions and then seeing, is this something that I would just solve by, writing a small script, like in my nursing world, I wrote a script for scheduling, and it was just something that was used on the unit. It didn't need to be something bigger, right? But it solved a specific problem where I didn't have to spend 4 hours a week in scheduling, but I could do it in a few minutes. Or it's something bigger where it could be 10, 20 years down the line where actual product is built. So with the Apple example that I was sharing, it was a problem that I was starting to see where it would be very beneficial for people to know what their quality of sleep was, especially when you're a cancer patient and you're going through these treatments and sleep problems, and also cardiotoxicity. With some of the cardiac drugs that we give, over time it can affect their heart rate, and also they can have anxiety. So I wanted to give them integrative medicine solutions, but I wanted to make it easier for them by being able to identify when they're having these issues. And the current solution at that time was to force them to wear this really heavy, instrument on their hand. So when I was talking to the participants, that's when I started to ask, okay, is it really how was it for you, for really? Yeah. And that's when they started to say, well, if you want us to wear it, I'll wear it for 24 hours, but it's not something I would wear every day. So as we started to talk about how important the problem is, and what are the barriers to adopting the solution, that's where we started to get together and say, what can we do? And we didn't even know there were people from Apple and, whatever other companies in the group. It was an open group that people just came and we started to brainstorm, and over time that became a product. So what you're saying is the core question that every innovator needs to keep in mind and keep coming back to so that their solution can be successful. If not, then we are setting ourselves up for failure.
Awesome. So I think this wraps up the panel. I don't know if you guys are going to stick around, but they'll probably be around for lunch. I just want to say thank you to the college and to Karen and Frank for the invitation. This has been a thrill for me. And again, I'm in awe of what you're doing. And to the panelists, you guys are amazing. So thank you, and Have a nice lunch.
Yes, thank you for the panel. Thank you.